This is question number 191 of the series, friends. You have two Azure subscriptions named Sub1 and Sub2. An administrator creates a custom role that has an assignable scope to a resource group named RG1 in Sub1. You need to ensure that you can apply the custom role to any resource group in Sub1 and Sub2. The solution must minimize administrative effort. What should you do? Your options are: select the custom role and add Sub1 and Sub2 to the assignable scopes. Remove RG1 from the assignable scopes. Create a new custom role for Sub1. Create a new custom role for Sub2. Remove the role from RG1. Create a new custom role for Sub1 and add Sub2 to the assignable scope. Remove the role from RG1. Select the custom role and add Sub1 to the assignable scopes. Remove RG1 from assignable scopes. Create a new custom role for Sub2. Friends, key to answer this question is minimize the administrative effort, as all solutions will achieve the end goal, and the solution which achieves the end goal with minimum administrative effort is option A. Select the custom role and add Sub1 and Sub2 to the assignable scopes. Remove RG1 from the assignable scopes. So friends, when you create a custom role, there are certain properties that you need to take into consideration. The first one is name, which is the role name. Second one is the ID name. Third one is basically the role type, whether it is a custom role, which you have to set to true, or custom role for custom roles. You have to give it a description. You have to define the actions. All these fields which I just mentioned are mandatory fields. And then you have some not actions, which is not a mandatory field. Then you can have data actions. Then you can have not data actions, which are 3 non-mandatory fields. And the final one is assignable scope, which is what we are concerned about while answering this question. And it is an array of strings that specifies the scope that the custom role is available for assignment. Maximum number of assignable scopes is 2000. So friends, this is the array of strings. Basically, you can have multiple values here. So in this case, in our question earlier, the scope was defined as a resource group, but now for the scope, you will remove the resource group and instead define Sub1 and Sub2 in the assignable scope. If we scroll a bit up, we can see an example which will be which will make things more clearer to you. In this example, the name of the custom role is virtual machine operator. Custom is set to true because it is a custom role. Description is set to can monitor and restart virtual machines. Then there are certain actions assigned here. Basically, the user who will get this role will be able to perform these certain actions. And now the not action, data action, and not data actions are left blank. These are not mandatory. You don't really need to use them unless you want to make more restrictive permissions. For example, you allowed something in action and you want to deny something in data action and so on. So you could use these roles. And the main part comes is assignable scope. So you can see it is assigned on 2 different subscriptions, which is subscription ID 1 and subscription ID 2. And then there is a provider defined, which is defined at a management group level and is targeted to group ID 1 only in the management group. So this pretty much confirms that you can have multiple subscriptions here. That is why the chosen option was to change the assignable scope and remove RG1 from there and add Sub1 and Sub2. This would have achieved the goal in the minimum administrative effort, which was always the key to answer this question. This is question number 192 of the series. You have an Azure subscription that contains a storage account named storage account 1234 and 2 users named user 1 and user 2. You assign user 1 the roles shown in the following exhibit. Basically, you can see there are 2 roles that are assigned to user 1, where you have one role named as reader role, which is inherited from the resource group level, and then the user one has storage blob data contributor role directly assigned on this resource. So let's look at the question. Which two actions can user one perform? Each correct answer presents a complete solution. And your options are: assign roles to user 2 for storage account 1234, upload blob data to storage account 1234, modify the firewall of storage account 1234, view blob data in storage account 1234, view file shares in storage account 1234. Friends, first option is obviously incorrect, as to assign roles, user one needs either an owner role or user access administrator role. So you can rule that out. Now, since the user has blob data contributor role, they will be able to upload blob data to storage account, making the option B as a correct choice. And to modify firewall of storage account, user needs storage blob data owner role, as it provides full access on containers. So an incorrect choice. And the fourth option is correct, because blob data contributor role gives access to view blob data. Friends, one thing to note, the global reader role doesn't give you access to view blob data. It just gives you access to view all resources. So you need to be aware about the differences between the global roles and specific roles. Reader role is just giving it access to view all the resources in this case. And we already know that option E is incorrect, as we already have chosen two required correct choices. However, for clarification, you need storage file data SMB share contributor role to view file shares in a storage account. So let's read through the permissions of storage blob data contributor role. It says read, write, and delete Azure storage containers and blobs. Now in the actions, you can see it has 4 permissions defined. It can delete a container, it can rerun a container, or it can return a container or a list of containers, modify a container's metadata or properties, return a user's delegation key for the blob service. Now it also has some data actions defined, which means it can perform certain actions on data as well, which is delete a blob, return a blob or a list of blobs, write to a blob, moves the blob from one path to another, returns the result of adding blob content. It doesn't have any not data actions or not actions defined. So I hope, friends, you now understand why the certain options were chosen as the correct answer in this case. So friends, before we start looking at question number 193, if you have not watched previous 2 parts of the series yet, then do not forget to watch them, as you wouldn't have got the notifications of those parts if you are not member of this channel. So if you are looking to watch those parts as well, do not forget to take out the silver membership of the channel, as that will give you access to both the videos. Now let's look at question number 193. You have an Azure subscription that is linked to a Microsoft Entra tenant. The tenant contains the custom role-based access control roles shown in the following table. Both of the roles are custom roles. Make a note of that. And the 2 roles are role 1 and role 2. Role 1 is a Azure subscription role and role 2 is a Entra ID role. From the Azure portal, you need to create 2 custom roles named role 3 and role 4. Role 3 will be an Azure subscription role. Role 4 will be a Entra ID role. Which roles can you clone to create the new roles? So folks, it is very important that you should know the differences here between the Azure subscription role and Entra ID role. So let's head to Azure portal to understand which roles can be cloned, and then we will come back with a better idea to answer this question. So folks, let's first look at a subscription role. And to create a subscription role, what you need to do is you go inside your subscription, select your subscription, and then go in access control IAM, and then you click add, and it will give you options: add role assignment, add co-administrator, and add custom roles. So I have already created a custom role so that we know which all options can be chosen while creating a custom role. Because the requirement given in the question is you are trying to create two custom roles, but you already have two custom roles, and in the options you need to choose whether you can copy a custom role, you can copy an inbuilt role, or you cannot copy those sort of things. So to see whether a role is a custom role or not, you go into the roles, and then in the types you need to select custom role. So you can see I have created a custom role with the name of test role for this demonstration. Now let's try to create a custom role. And friends, now when you are creating the custom role, you get three options in the baseline permissions. Either you can clone an existing role, or you can start from scratch, or you can start from JSON. Now our question is pretty much limited to cloning a role. So let's see what all options you can see here. Now, when you select clone a role, you get a new tab basically where you can select the role to clone. Now, if you open this, you can see you are getting different options: owner, contributor, reader. These are the built-in roles that you can clone. That's the first part to answer the question. Now, let's see if we are able to search the custom role as well here. So if I type test role, you can see test role is also showing up here. That means when you are trying to create a subscription role, you can copy a built-in role as well, and you can also copy a custom role. Let's now head to the Microsoft Entra ID to see more about Entra ID roles. Now for Entra ID, once you are in Entra ID, you need to click on roles and administrators. Once this loads, you get an option to create a new custom role. And friends, here you in the baseline permissions, you only get two options, whether start from scratch or clone from a custom role. Now you would notice that here Microsoft is pretty much specific: clone from a custom role. There the words were cloned from a role, and here the words are cloned from a custom role, which confirms that you cannot clone a built-in role. That's what I wanted to show you in the portal. So now I hope you now know when you are creating a subscription based role, you can clone a custom role, you can clone a built-in role as well. But when you are creating an Entra ID role, you can only clone a custom role or start from scratch. Now let's head back to our presentation and see the questions and try to answer them. So the first part of the question is talking about role 3, and in the question you can see role 3 will be a Azure subscription role. So which roles can you copy? You can copy a custom role and you can copy a built-in role, which means third option, basically role 1 and Azure built-in subscription role only would be the right choice here, because role 1 is a Azure subscription role, so you can copy it. You cannot copy an Azure subscription role and create an Entra ID role, or vice versa. You have to have a match. There cannot be a mix and match of these two roles. And the next part of the question is about role 4. And you already know role 4 will be a Entra ID role. So basically you can only copy a custom Entra ID role and not built-in Entra ID role. So what would be the answer? It would be role 2 only. So friends, I hope this has given you clarity on why the options are chosen. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comments section. Let's look at question number 194. You have a Microsoft Entra tenant named contoso.com. You have a CSV file that contains the names and email addresses of 500 external users. You need to create a guest user account in contoso.com for each of the 500 external users. And the solution you choose is you create a PowerShell script that runs the new -mg user commandlet for each external user. Does this solution meet the goal? And friends, this solution does not meet the goal. So to create a guest user account in Azure AD or Entra ID, you will use the command new-azure AD ms invitation command. This commandlet is used to invite a new external user to your directory. And here now, if you scroll down, we can see the parameters. The first parameter is invited user display name, basically the display name of the user as it will appear in your directory. Then invited user email address. the email address to which the invitation is sent. Now you can see the display name is not a mandatory field, whereas email address is a mandatory field. And then the third option or parameter is invited user message info, additional information to specify how the invitation message is sent. Again, this is not a mandatory parameter. Then the next parameter is invited user type, the user type of the user being invited. By default, this is guest. You can invite as member if you are a company administrator. And again, this is not a mandatory field, so you can skip it. Then the last parameter is invited redirect URL, the URL to which the invited user is forwarded after accepting the invitation. And this is a mandatory field. And there is one more field as well, send invitation message, which is a Boolean parameter that indicates whether or not an invitation message will be sent to the invited user. And this is also a non-mandatory field. Question number 195 of the series. You have an Entra ID tenant named contoso.com. You have two external partner organizations named fabricam.com and litware-incorporation.com. Fabricam.com is configured as a connected organization. Friends, make a note, fabricam.com is configured as a connected organization. This will be helpful in answering the question. You create an access package as shown in the access package exhibit on the right-hand side of your screen. The name of the package is package 1, description is guest user, catalog name is general, and then it is applied to a group named group 1. Which is a security group, and role is member. Now, basically it tells you whether who can request access, all configured connected organizations. So this is why I was telling you, make a note that fabricam.com is configured as a connected organization, whereas litware-incorporation.com doesn't have any mention. So we can assume that it is not connected. Require approval is set to no and enabled is set to yes. Basically, this package is enabled. And at the bottom, you can see there is a lifecycle defined. Access package assignments expire after 365 days and require access reviews is set to no. Let's now look at further things in this question. You configure the external user lifecycle settings as shown in the lifecycle exhibit. And in the lifecycle exhibit, basically it says block external users from sign in to this directory is set to yes, and remove external user is also set to yes. And the condition is number of days before removing external user from this directory is 30 days. So friends, for each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And the first statement is litware-incorporation.com users can be assigned to package. And friends, this statement is incorrect because litware-incorporation.com is not defined as a connected organization. So this access package doesn't apply to it. Statement 2, after 365 days, fabricam.com users will be removed from group 1. And this statement is correct, because it was specified in the access package that after 365 days, the users will be removed. We'll understand this in more detail in a while. First, let's look at statement 3. After 395 days, fabricam.com users will be removed from the contoso.com tenant. Again, this is correct because after 365 days, they are going to get removed from the groups. And on the life cycle of external users on your screen, it says number of days before removing external users from this directory is 30 days. So basically 365 plus 30 is 395. That means after 365 days, it will be removed from the group. And after 395 days, it will be removed from tenant. So friends, let's read through add a group or team resource role to understand why statement 2 that after 365 days, the user will be removed from group was chosen as the correct choice. You can have entitlement management automatically add users to a group or team in Microsoft Teams when they are assigned an access package. And now the points are when a membership of a group or team is a resource role that's part of an access package and a user is assigned to that access package, the user is added as a member to that team or group if not already present. Now, the next statement is what is going to confirm the answer. When a user's access package assignment expires, you would have seen in the snapshot that the assignment was going to expire after 365 days. They are removed from the group or team unless they currently have an assignment to another access package that includes the same group or team. So folks, in the question, there was no mention of whether the users have assignment to a different package or same group and so on. That is why I have chosen that after 365 days, the user will be removed from the group. And after 395 days, they will be removed from the tenant. So friends, I hope you now have clarity on why those options were chosen as the correct choice. But as I always say, if you still have any doubts, then please post them in the comment section. This is question number 196 of the series. You have an Azure subscription. You create the following Azure Resource Manager template named template1. You need to deploy template.json. Which PowerShell commandlet should you run from the Azure Cloud Shell? Your options are new AZ deployment, new AZ management group deployment, new AZ resource group deployment, and new AZ tenant deployment. Friends, if you look closely in this template, they are trying to create a resource group. So the correct answer here would be option A, new AZ deployment. If the template is changed a bit and there is a mention of creating a resource inside the resource group, then correct answer would be option C, new AZ resource group deployment. So friends, let's go through all the commands which were mentioned in the question. The first one was new AZ deployment. As you can see, it creates a deployment at the current subscription scope. This command has another alias as well, which is new AZ subscription deployment. However, that has been deprecated and the new command is new-AZ deployment. It is to create a deployment at the current subscription scope. And if we scroll down, let's look at one of the examples. Basically, when you are using this command, you need to run new-AZ deployment. Then this is the location. Basically, here the location is West US, and this location is not the location where resources are going to create it. This is the location where the metadata of your deployment is going to be saved. And then it has a parameter -template file where you specify which template file you are trying to deploy. And then it has a parameter template parameter file. Again, it is the location to the file which has your parameters saved. Then if you want to create any tags during the deployment, then you can create, you can use the parameter -tag, and it is a hash table, which is you can have multiple key value pairs inside this tag. So friends, the next command was new-AZ management group deployment. This command is used to create a deployment at the management group level. If I scroll down and see through an example, basically the example is new-AZ management group deployment. Then you need to specify the management group ID. Then everything is similar to new AZ deployment. You specify the location where your deployment metadata is going to be saved. Then you specify the template file, template parameter file, and you can also specify the tags as part of the hash table. So friends, the third command was new-AZ resource group deployment. As you can see, it adds a deployment at a resource group level. So the first command was doing the deployment at the subscription level. The second command was doing the deployment at the management group level. And this third command is doing the deployment at resource group level. And if you look at the example of this command, again, you need to supply the resource group name in this case. In the previous case, because you were doing the deployment at management group level, so you were supplying the management group ID. And in this case, you are going to supply the resource group name. Rest of the parameters are same, where you need to supply the template file, you need to supply the template parameter files, and then any tags that you would like to supply. And fourth and the final command, which was in the question, is new-AZ tenant deployment. Basically, it creates a deployment at tenant scope. You would already know by now. And if you look at the example here, new-AZ tenant deployment, then location is West US, and template file you have to specify template parameters file, and then you specify tag. This command is exactly same as that of new AZ deployment. However, the behavior of new AZ deployment is to create a deployment at subscription scope, whereas new -az tenant deployment command, which is exactly same, is going to create a deployment at tenant scope. So friends, I hope you now understand the differences between all four commands in the question, as if you make slight changes to the ARM template, the correct option is going to change. This is question number 197 of the series. You have an Azure subscription that contains the resource groups shown below. You have two resource groups, basically with the name of RG1 and RG2. Both of them have a lock applied. RG1 has a read-only lock applied, and RG2 has a delete lock applied. Now, RG1 contains the resources shown in the following table. Basically, there are three resources with the name of storage 1, VNet 1, IP 1. Storage 1 is a storage account which has a lock named lock 1 and its type is delete. VNet 1 is a virtual network type which has a lock named lock 2 and it is read-only type, and IP1 is a public IP address type and it does not have any lock associated with it. Now the question is, you need to identify which resources you can move from RG1 to RG2. Which resources should you identify? Your options are none, IP1 only, IP1 and storage 1 only, IP1, VNet 1 and storage 1. Folks, you can see there is a lock applied at the resource group level for RG1 and you are trying to move resources from RG1 to RG2, and RG1 has a read-only lock applied. So a read-only lock on a resource group prevents you from moving existing resources in or out of resource group. Therefore, you won't be able to move anything from RG1 to RG2. If the lock on RG1 was maybe delete lock, so you would have been able to move things out of it. But since it has a read-only lock applied to it, therefore you won't be able to move anything from RG1 to RG2. Friends, let's understand locks a bit. As an administrator, you can lock an Azure subscription, resource group, or resource to protect them from accidental user deletions and modification. The lock overrides any user permissions. So this first statement tells you that you can apply lock at subscription level, resource group level, or even at the resource level. This can form one of the questions, so it is important that you should remember this. You can set locks that prevent either deletion or modifications. In the portal, these locks are called as delete and read only. In the command line, these locks are called as cannot delete and read only. Cannot delete means authorized users can read and modify a resource, but they cannot delete it. Read only means authorized users can read a resource, but they cannot delete or update it. Applying this lock is similar to restricting all authorized users to the permission that the reader role provides. Now let's look at lock inheritance. When you apply a lock at a parent scope, all resources within that scope inherit the same lock. Even resources you add later inherit the same parent lock. The most restrictive lock in the inheritance takes precedence. There can be a situation where a resource has both read-only lock and delete lock applied to them. So in that case, read-only lock will take precedence because it is more restrictive in nature. As you would have already read, with read lock, you cannot delete it or you cannot even update it. But with delete lock, you can modify the resource. Therefore, read-only lock is more restrictive in nature. Now, if you scroll down, there are some considerations before applying your locks. Let's read through one of the considerations which has helped us in answering the question. A read-only lock on a resource group prevents you from moving existing resources in or out of the resource group. This is what played a critical role in me choosing none as the right choice in this case. Friends, you should be across all these limitations because there can be different variations of these questions. Folks, before we start looking at question number 198, I would like to remind you that if you are looking to get PDF version of these videos, then they are also available to the channel members at Gold tier. If you think you are spending a lot of time watching these videos and you want to do a quick revision, you just need to join this channel as a gold member and email me at devopshub2023@gmail.com to request the PDF file. You have an Azure subscription named Subscription 1. Subscription 1 contains a virtual machine named VM1. You install and configure a web server and a DNS server on VM1. VM1 has the effective network security rules shown below. Now there is an exhibit on your screen which shows some of the network security rules that have been configured on VM1. So friends, to answer this question, you should know two things. First one is that rules are processed in the order of their priority. That means rule with priority 100 will be evaluated before the rule with priority 400. And second one is, since the question is talking about web server and DNS server, so you should know that default port of web server connectivity are port 80 and 443, and for DNS server it is port 53. Let's now look at next part of this question. Use the drop-down menus to select the answer choice that completes each statement based on the information presented in the graphic. Internet users, and your options are: can connect to only the DNS server on VM1, can connect to only the web server on VM1, can connect to the web server and the DNS server on VM1, cannot connect to the web server and the DNS server on Web1. To answer this question, let's go back to the exhibit and see the rules that are defined in more detail. So as I said earlier, rules will be evaluated based on their priority. That means rule 2 will be evaluated first. And if you look at rule 2, the port numbers that are mentioned are 50 to 60. And that means DNS server which runs on port 53 will be denied because the action is defined as denied. That means users won't be able to access the DNS server. That's the first part of the question. Let's now look at whether the web server will be accessible or not. And you would already know web server is at port 80 and 443, which lies between the rule 1 range because it defines rule port 50 to 500, and the action is set to allow. That means the connectivity for the web server will be allowed. Now there is a deny all inbound rule, but its priority you can see is 65,500, but it will not be evaluated because rule 400 will allow the connection, so it will not come into picture. That means the correct answer here would be can connect to only the web server on VM1. Now let's look at next part of this question. If you delete rule 2, internet users, again, all the 4 options. Now the rule 2 was at top of hierarchy, which was blocking DNS server. If you delete rule 2, that means you will be able to access DNS server as well. And the correct answer here would be can connect to web server and the DNS server on VM1. Friends, you can expect similar type of questions in the exam. So it is very important that you know how to read the exhibit of the network security rules, which you saw on your screen. Let's look at question number 199. You have an Azure virtual machine that runs Windows Server 2022 and are configured as shown in the following table. Basically, you have 2 virtual machines with the name of VM1 and VM2. The private IP address of VM1 is 10.1.0.4 and of VM2 is 10.1.0.5. The public IP address of VM1 is 52.186.85.63 and the public address of VM2 is 13.92.168.13. And both of the VMs are connected to VNet 1, and the DNS suffix of VM1 is devopshub.com and VM2 is techwithjaspal.com. You create a private Azure DNS zone named devopshub.com. You configure the techwithjaspal.com zone to allow auto registration from VNet 1, which A records will be added to the devopshub.com zone for each virtual machines. A records for VM1, and your options are none, private IP address only, public IP address only, private IP address, and public IP address. Now, DevOpsHub.com is a private DNS zone which has been linked to VNet 1 with auto registration. Therefore, every VM which resides in VNet 1 will have a record in DevOpsHub.com, which means a record for VM1 will be private IP address only. Now, the next part is a record for VM2. And due to the very same reason, the correct answer here would also be private IP address only. So friends, the reason to choose private DNS was because of the split horizon functionality of private DNS. This diagram mimics what we were trying to achieve in the question given. You have a virtual network A that has two VNets. That's what was happening. VNet A-VM1 and VNet A-VM2. Both have a private IP and public IP configured. This is what you saw in the requirement. A public DNS zone called contoso.com was created and registers the public IP for these VMs as DNS records within the zone. A private DNS zone is also created called contoso.com. You defined virtual network A as a registration virtual network. Azure then automatically registers the VM as A records into the private zone pointing to their private IPs. This is why we have chosen private IP as the correct answer. Now, when an internet client does a DNS query for VNet a-vm1.contoso.com, Azure will return the public IP record from the public zone. If the same DNS query is issued from another VM, for example, VNet A-VM2 in the same virtual network A, Azure will return the private IP record from the private zone. This is the diagram which is trying to demonstrate what was asked in this question. So let's look at question number 200 of the series now. You have an Azure subscription that contains the virtual networks shown in the following table. You have two virtual networks with the name of VNet 1 and VNet 2. Both of them have a subnet named subnet 1 and subnet 2. Again, the associated network security groups are NSG1 and NSG2. And you can see in the peering, VNet 1 is paired with VNet 2 and VNet 2 is reverse paired with VNet 1. The subscription contains the virtual machines shown in the following table. You have two virtual machines named VM1 and VM2. VM1 is connected to subnet 1 and VM2 is connected to subnet 2. The subscription contains the Azure App Service web apps shown in the following table. You have two web apps named Web App 1 and Web App 2. Web App 1 uses the premium pricing tier and has virtual network integration with VNet 1. And Web App 2 uses the isolated pricing tier and is deployed to subnet 2. For each of the following statements, select yes if the statement is true, otherwise select no. And the first statement is Web App 1 can communicate with VM2. Friends, let's first understand virtual network integration, as that's critical for answering this question, as Web App 1 has virtual network integration with VNet 1. Virtual network integration gives your app access to resources in your virtual network, but it doesn't grant inbound private access to your app from the virtual network. Private site access refers to making an app accessible only from a private network, such as from within an Azure virtual network. Virtual network integration is used only to make outbound calls from your app into your virtual network. The virtual network integration feature requires a supported basic or standard, premium, premium version 2, premium version 3, or elastic premium app service pricing tier. And the app which we have, which is Web App 1, is on a premium tier, so we are on the right requirement. Supports TCP and UDP, works with app service apps, function apps, and logic apps. There are some things that virtual network integration doesn't support, like mounting a drive, Windows Server Active Directory domain join, and NetBIOS. Virtual network integration supports connecting to a virtual network in the same region. Using virtual network integration enables your app to access resources in the virtual network you are integrated with. This is one of the things that you need to take into consideration while answering the question. Resources in virtual network peer to the virtual network your app is integrated with, including global peering connections, resources across Azure Express Route connections, service endpoint secured services, private endpoint enabled services. When you use virtual network integration, you can use the following Azure networking features. Again, one of these statements will help you in answering one of these statements that you will see in a while. Network security groups. You can block outbound traffic with a NSG that you use on your integration subnet. The inbound rules don't apply because you can't use virtual network integration to provide inbound access to your app. Route tables, you can place a route table on the integration subnet to send outbound traffic where you want. NAT gateway, you can use NAT gateway to get a dedicated outbound IP and mitigate SNAT port exhaustion. So friends, Web App 1 has VNet integration with VNet 1 and VNet 1 has peering configured with VNet 2, which is used by VM2. So Web App 1 can communicate with VM2. Now the next statement is NSG1 controls inbound traffic of Web App 1. Based on what we read, virtual network integration is used only to make outbound calls from your app into your virtual network. So this statement is incorrect. Let's look at third statement. Web App 2 can communicate with VM1. Web App 2 is deployed to Subnet 2 and Subnet 2 is in VNet 2. VNet 2 is paired with VNet 1, which VM1 is connected to. So Web App 2 can communicate with VM1. So friends, I hope this has given you clarity on how to answer such type of questions. But if you still have any doubts, please post them in the comment section. And as always, if you have liked the video, do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe the channel.